Now let us go through some of the questions. Look at this question. A 16-year-old girl presents to gynae OPD with primary amenorrhea. Her breasts are well developed, however, pubic hair are absent. An ultrasound was suggested which showed absence of uterus. What is the probable diagnosis? Is it A. Mullerian agenesis, B. androgen insensitivity syndrome, C. Turner syndrome, or D. Coleman syndrome? See, primary amenorrhea is a very, very important topic for your entrance exam, and every year they ask a question or two. Sometimes there are 2-3 questions in same paper from primary or secondary amenorrhea. Why? Because this is a very interesting topic and it is concept based. What is the concept here? First of all, you should know what is primary amenorrhea. It is when a girl is 14 years of age and has not yet attained menarche in the absence of secondary sexual characters. And if secondary sexual characters are present, then we give her 2 more years for menarche to be attained, and that is the year 16. So by the age of 14, if she has not attained menarche and not even secondary sexual characters, or by 16 if she has not attained menarche, okay, in presence of secondary sexual characters. So here the breasts are well developed, pubic hair are absent, and the ultrasound, it shows absence of uterus. So for you to know, there in gynecology there are only 2 conditions where the uterus is absent. So as soon as you see absent uterus, you know that your differential has narrowed down tremendously to only these 2 conditions. Absent uterus is seen only in these 2 conditions in gynae. It is Mullerian agenesis or congenital androgen insensitivity syndrome. So this makes your answer very easy. Okay, now you have to differentiate between the 2. What is the diagnosis? So to understand that, see, this is what you need to understand. As I told you, this is concept based. To start with, every gonad in a fetus, the gonads are bipotential. Okay, the gonad can either turn into a testes or into ovary. So it has to have some signal, no, for it to turn to testes. That signal is Y chromosome. Okay, so if the fetus has Y chromosome, if the fetus is a male fetus, genotypically male, the Y chromosome has a gene called as SRY gene. Okay, SRY gene, which is present on short arm of Y chromosome, basically triggers the gonad, and the gonad is formed into testes by 8 weeks of period of gestation. Now this testes has 2 types of cells. Okay, we have Leydig cells and Sertoli cells here in testes. Okay, now Leydig cells produce testosterone, right? This testosterone basically is responsible for formation of external genitalia. Okay, external genitalia forms into male. Okay. So testosterone is basically converted into a more potent form of testosterone, dihydrotestosterone by 5-alpha reductase. So testosterone is responsible for external genitalia, and there we have Sertoli cells. Sertoli cells secrete Mullerian inhibiting factor, also called as anti-Mullerian hormone. And as the name suggests, it inhibits Mullerian structures. What are Mullerian structures? Basically, Mullerian structures are the female internal reproductive organs, which includes uterus, cervix, the upper 2/3 of vagina, and fallopian tube. So if there is Mullerian inhibiting substance, then these structures will not form. Instead, Wolffian structures forms. Okay, Wolffian structures form, and these structures include epididymis, vas deferens, vas efferens, seminal vesicle, ejaculatory duct, and so on. So that is how male internal and external genitalia is formed. Okay, so in contrast to that, if the gonad does not receive that signal, if Y chromosome is absent, so in XX chromosome, okay, a genotypically female fetus, their Y chromosome is absent, so there is no trigger. The gonad then develops into ovaries. Okay, ovaries do not have Leydig cells. Ovaries do not have Sertoli cells. Okay. So there is no testosterone. In absence of testosterone, there is no masculinization of genitalia, and thus the female genitalia, okay, external genitalia of female is formed. Okay. And since there is no Mullerian inhibiting factor, so the Mullerian structures forms. Okay, Mullerian structures form, which includes uterus and cervix and fallopian tube and upper 2/3 of vagina. Why am I calling it upper 2/3 of vagina? Because lower 1/3 is formed by urogenital sinus, not by Mullerian structure. So that can be there, right? So this is how female internal and external genitalia is formed. So if you can appreciate here, it is the absence of Y chromosome which is forming external and internal female genitalia. So we can say that by default the fetus is female. If the fetus has Y chromosome, then the presence of testes will form the male internal external structures, right? So this makes us wonder what would happen if ovaries are removed. What would happen if ovaries are removed in fetus? Nothing will happen, right? Ovary per se is not doing anything. There is no estrogen, FSH, LH, anything involved in the development of the fetus, in the development of internal and external genitalia. So this is the concept basically around which all these syndromes revolve, okay? Now, when you talk about primary amenorrhea with absent uterus, here we have congenital androgen insensitivity syndrome. Okay, what is it? Androgen insensitivity syndrome. In this, the baby is XY. Okay, so XY is producing has Leydig cells. Okay, in testes, there is testes, right? So testes has Leydig cells. Leydig cells produce testosterone, right? And it has Sertoli cells. Sertoli cells produce what? Mullerian inhibiting factor, right? But the problem here is that this testosterone has no effect on the body because it is congenital androgen insensitivity syndrome. So the body is resistant to this testosterone, okay? Due to this resistance, testosterone although is there and in fact it is present in male levels, but still it has no effect. So the external genitalia feels as if there is no testosterone because it is resistant, okay? So the external genitalia turns into female despite Y chromosome being present, right? What about internal genitalia? In internal genitalia, there is Mullerian inhibiting factor is still there, right? So in presence of Mullerian inhibiting factor, the Mullerian structures are absent, right? Because Mullerian inhibiting factor is there. So imagine this is a female who has external genitalia that of a female, right? She identifies herself as female. The internal genitalia is not there because Mullerian inhibiting factor is there. So this is a female who is tall, right? She has the external genitalia is that of a female. What about breast? See, in this female, the breast is well developed. Okay, this is a female where the breasts are well developed. Okay, how is that possible? This excessive androgen that is there, the testosterone, is peripherally converted to estrogen and that leads to the development of breasts, right? What about pubic hair? What about pubic hair? Pubic hair are absent. Why? Because pubic hair and axillary hair, these are all androgen dependent and androgen is not working in the body because the body is resistant to it. The receptors are resistant. Okay. So, this is a tall, beautiful female. So, that is how you should remember it. You will never forget it if you remember it like that. So, these females are tall, beautiful females with completely hairless, supple body, well developed breasts. By looking at them, you cannot guess that this female basically has XY chromosome. And a lot of Vogue models, even Jamie Lee Curtis, these models, and there are many celebrities, Hollywood celebrities, there are CIS, they have CIS. So these are all beautiful females, right? But they have absent uterus, okay? Now, in contrast to that, we have Mullern agenesis, or we call it Rokitansky-Meyer-Custer-Hauser syndrome. In Mullern agenesis, as the name suggests, there are no Mullern structures, so that is why uterus is absent, okay? So, here, if you want to differentiate between the two, primary amenorrhea with absent uterus, so it can either be Mullern agenesis or congenital androgen insensitivity syndrome. So in Mullern agenesis, the chromosome is XX, okay, XX, but due to some reason there is Mullern agenesis, okay. Here in CIS we have read it, it's XY. Right. So, Mullern agenesis, the phenotype and genotype both are that of a female. In congenital androgen insensitivity syndrome, the phenotype is female, but the genotype is that of a male. In both the cases, the Mullern structures, the uterus will be absent. Here, the gonads are ovaries. Okay, the gonads are ovaries. Ovaries develop from gonadal ridge, right? So, gonads will be ovaries. And here the gonads are testes. And where do these testes lie? Because there is no scrotum. These testes usually lie in the inguinal canal, which is why this patient can also present with primary amenorrhea or with inguinal hernia. Okay. So, breasts here are in both the cases, breasts are well developed because estrogen is present. Here, the ovary is producing estrogen, and there in CIS, the testosterone is peripherally getting converted through the adipose tissue into estrogen. So, here in both the cases, breast development is there. Here, the pubic hair is present. Okay, pubic hair is present. Pubic hair are absent here in this. So, this is the differentiating factor. This is what they ask in question, and this is how you differentiate between the two. Okay, and you will be able to remember it if you know that CAIS, congenital androgen insensitivity syndrome, previously called as testicular feminization syndrome. These are beautiful females with hairless body, well developed breasts, right? Alright. So, unfortunately, MRKH or Mullern agenesis, it is associated with a lot of comorbidities. So, there are urological abnormalities like agenesis, renal agenesis, horseshoe-shaped kidney. Then there are skeletal abnormalities like scoliosis, cardiac abnormalities, deafness, but no such comorbid conditions are seen with the CIS. So, it has a slightly better prognosis. Okay. In Mullern agenesis, you will do vaginoplasty for her to, have a good sexual life. And for CAIS, what do? There is no vagina, just a blind pouch is there. So, for them, you will create a vagina. Vaginoplasty is still there. But what about those testes hanging there in the inguinal canal? Will you remove them at the time of diagnosis? No. You wait till puberty. So, this is the only condition where you wait till the puberty, because her breast development is dependent on the testosterone that the testes is producing, right? So, you wait till puberty and then do gonadectomy. Gonadectomy is done after puberty. Okay. Now, also you rear these individuals as females even though they are XY. So, what will be the answer to this question now that you have all the knowledge? Here 16-year-old, primary amenorrhea, absent uterus, breasts are well developed, pubic hair absent, okay, absent pubic hair, beautiful females, androgen insensitivity syndrome. Alright? Right. So now let us move on to the next question. A 30-year-old patient has scanty menstruation with only spotting since 6 months. She has had 3 DNC, that is dilatation and curettage, in past for incomplete abortion. Okay. Ultrasound shows irregular thinning of endometrium. How will you manage this case? Repeat DNC, endometrial ablation, hysteroscopy, antibiotic treatment. What is it that they are talking about? What is the condition? Do you have anything in mind? This is Asherman syndrome. Okay, Asherman syndrome or uterine synechia. Alright, uterine synechia. So basically adhesions form inside the uterus and this is called as Asherman syndrome. So how will you identify Asherman syndrome? They will give you a very typical presentation. Okay, in the presentation they will either tell you that the patient is amenorrheic. Okay, there is secondary amenorrhea, or she is a case of infertility, secondary amenorrhea. Then they'll tell you that there is a history of DNC. So this is the most important. That is how you solve these questions. You pick up the right keywords, right? So here DNC, this is almost always invariably given in your question. So either a history of DNC is given or a history of genital tuberculosis is given. Okay. So Asherman syndrome, this synechia formation is seen in multiple DNCs in past and in genital tuberculosis. Okay. And ultrasound shows also, this is another pointer, ultrasound shows irregular thinning of endometrium. So this uterine synechia on ultrasound, if you want to see, on ultrasound it looks like a thin endometrium or an irregularly thin endometrium basically. How will you manage this case? So basically they are asking you about the management of Asherman syndrome. You do repeat DNC, endometrial ablation, hysteroscopy or antibiotic treatment. Okay, so in Asherman syndrome, the answer, the treatment of Asherman syndrome is hysteroscopy, and we will see how. It is not DNC because DNC is leading to it. A random DNC will not help you reach all the synechia. Endometrial ablation, as a matter of fact, it is given in a lot of questions as one of the options and it is seldom an answer. Endometrial ablation is usually not the answer, okay, in any question. And then antibiotic treatment, and antibiotic treatment really doesn't help. There is no infection, no, so it does not really help. Now, if the patient presents with secondary amenorrhea, basically in this case sometimes they give you this secondary amenorrhea. Okay, secondary amenorrhea. A patient presents with secondary amenorrhea. What do you do first? First of all, you rule out pregnancy. Okay, always rule out pregnancy in a reproductive age group female. You do UPT, urine pregnancy test. If UPT is positive, then treat her. Okay, fine. If UPT is negative, okay, if UPT is negative, then what do? You do progesterone challenge test. Okay, progesterone challenge test. In this, you give progesterone, medroxyprogesterone acetate usually is given 10 milligram twice a day for 7 days. Okay, and then you see if the patient bleeds. Now, after giving progesterone challenge test, if she bleeds, okay, if she bleeds, then this is an anovulatory reason, okay, an ovulatory cycle, okay, an ovulatory cycle, most common cause of which is PCOS, okay. This means that there was mere deficiency of progesterone, there was a lot of estrogen, there was no ovulation happening. After ovulation, the progesterone comes into place, which stabilizes the endometrium, and once the progesterone is withdrawn, then the endometrium sheds away. Because there is no ovulation, there is no progesterone. Once you give progesterone from outside, the patient ovulates. Okay, so this is an ovulatory cycle, and you have the diagnosis, and almost in most of the cases it is PCOS. Now, if the patient does not bleed, so if there is no withdrawal bleeding, okay, if there is no withdrawal bleeding, then what is the reason? It means that even estrogen is not present in the body. Even estrogen is not present. So, what do you do next? So, it may suggest that estrogen is not present. So, you give E plus P. Okay, you give E plus P. E plus P is estrogen plus progesterone. After giving E plus P, now after giving E plus P, still if the patient does not bleed, no bleeding. Okay, if the patient does not bleed, then it means that the uterus is gone. There is some problem with the uterus, there is some end organ damage. This is where the diagnosis of Asherman syndrome is made. Okay, because there is synechia formation, right? There is no endometrium to form, because in Asherman syndrome what happens is that you curettage a lot, okay, so the basalis layer is destroyed. With every cycle, the endometrium sheds off and the basalis layer is always intact. In Asherman syndrome, the basalis layer goes away, which is why the synechia form and there is no endometrium to regenerate. Okay, so this is Asherman syndrome. Here the E2 will be normal. Okay, the estrogen will be normal. There is no problem with the hormones, right? After giving E plus P, now if the patient bleeds, you know that, okay, fine, estrogen was absent, both the hormones are gone. Now, this can be either due to ovarian pathology, okay, so that is premature ovarian failure, or it can be central, okay, it can be a central cause, okay, probably the pituitary is not working well, right? So, how do you differentiate between the two? In premature ovarian failure, FSH will be high, okay, FSH will be high in the central cause. If the FSH is not producing, there will be no estrogen, there will be no progesterone, right? Here the FSH will be low, okay. So this is how briefly you proceed in case of secondary amenorrhea. So a few more things here are that in Asherman syndrome, the progesterone challenge test is negative. Okay, the patient does not bleed with progesterone challenge test. She does not even bleed with estrogen and progesterone. Okay, negative with estrogen and progesterone also. Okay. So this is also something they have asked in past. How does it look like? This is the HSG picture. Here, if you can see small defects, small black dots. These black dots are small defects. Okay, this is where the dye goes, and the white area is where the dye, the white area and black area are basically differentiated, where the dye reaches and where it doesn't. It also gives sometimes a honeycomb appearance. Okay. So, and on hysteroscopy, how does hysteroscopy help? This is how normally it looks like. Okay, the hysteroscopy is when you put a camera inside and you look at the cavity. This is how it normally looks like, and this is how it looks like in uterine synechia. Okay, uterine synechia or Asherman syndrome. This is how it looks like in Asherman syndrome, right? So, why is hysteroscopy the best test in Asherman syndrome? Because here you can see and treat. Okay, in Asherman syndrome, if you are suspecting, next step is hysteroscopy. You look at the synechia and then you cut it, you treat it there and then. Okay, followed by either a copper T insertion or E plus P, followed by E plus P. You help the endometrium regenerate. Now, the next question, a 40-year-old obese patient presents with AUB and on ultrasound has thick ET. Okay, thick ET, endometrial thickness is high. Endometrial sampling reveals endometrial hyperplasia without atypia. What is the line of management? Is it Mirena, oral progesterone, hysterectomy, TH, BSO, hysterectomy with bilateral salping oophorectomy? See, these two things you will not do. Okay, first let us try to exclude it. You will not do hysterectomy. Definitely you will not remove ovaries. Why? Because it is without atypia, right? There is no atypical features. So you will not do this. Oral progesterone and Mirena. Out of these two, which is a better agent? First of all, how do you manage atypia or without atypia, the endometrial hyperplasia? So basically in endometrial hyperplasia, if it is without atypia, endometrial hyperplasia without atypia, okay, without atypia, or atypical hyperplasia, okay, endometrial hyperplasia with atypia. If there is no atypia, then you can just give progesterone. The best agent, okay, the best agent is Mirena. It has a contraceptive advantage also and it acts better. And then second line is oral progesterone. Okay, so when you are asked about this without atypia, Mirena is the answer. Okay, if atypia is seen, then there are high chances of this progressing to cancer. Okay, in as high as 28 to 29% of cases. So if there are atypical features present, then you see what is the age of the patient and what does the patient want. If the patient is desirous of fertility, okay, if the fertility is desired, then you can still try Mirena. Okay, but if she has completed her family, there is no problem. Why to keep these atypical changes? Then you do simple hysterectomy. Okay. Also, you should know that there is one special progesterone that is there for endometrial hyperplasia, that is called as megestrol acetate. Okay. So, what is the answer to this question? It is Mirena. Endometrial hyperplasia without atypia, use Mirena. Okay. This question, this was asked recently. Identify this image. So they ask you these image based questions, and what is this? This is HSG. Okay, hysterosalpingography. Is this a normal HSG? Bilateral hydrosalpinx, bilateral cornual block, or none? What do we do in HSG? Basically, we put in a dye from below, and then the dye is pushed into the uterus, and under fluoroscopic guidance, we see where the dye is going. So the dye should ideally, it is a urographin dye, it should ideally fill the entire cavity, uterine cavity, go through the tubes and pass out of the tubes and spill into the peritoneal cavity. So this here, what is it? Before this, you should know how does a normal HSG looks like. So this is how a normal HSG looks like. Okay, this is how normally it is seen. In a normal HSG, there is this uterus which can be seen, and then there you will be able to see a very thin thread-like structure. Okay, here in this picture, it looks like this. Okay, a very thin structure like this, and then the dye finally is present in the peritoneum. There is peritoneal spilling. Okay, similarly here, if you can appreciate, a thin structure can be seen, and this is where the dye spills. From this, if you can make out here, what is the difference? The difference is this. Okay, look at this. It is how this is looking. It looks like something that is sausage shaped. Okay, sausage shaped. So the tube is dilated. It looks like there is something in the tube. It is bilateral hydrosalpinx. Okay, it is bilateral hydrosalpinx. The answer is bilateral hydrosalpinx, in which you can see that the tube is dilated. It is sausage shaped. So the answer here is bilateral hydrosalpinx. So now they have asked this also, bilateral cornual block. Why is it not cornual block? This is how a cornual block looks like. In cornual block, only the uterus can be seen. Okay, only the uterus can be seen, and here is the uterus. Okay, but there is no thin structure, no spilling around. Okay, so this is cornual block. This is bilateral cornual block. Okay, also to cover other HSG based questions, sometimes they give you something like this. If you can appreciate the difference between these two, then there is a single uterine cavity here as opposed to two cavities here. Okay, the two cavities that can be seen here. And look at this diagram. If you can see, this is how it looks like. Okay, so this here is bicornuate uterus. More likely bicornuate, and this is more likely septate. Okay, although it is difficult to diagnose, to differentiate between bicornuate and septate just on the basis of HSG finding, but still in a bicornuate uterus there will be two horns appearing separate from each other, and it will make an obtuse angle. Okay, it will make an obtuse angle. Okay, and the difference between the two horns would be more than 4 centimeter. Now, as opposed to that, in septate uterus, it will make an acute angle. Okay, an acute angle, and the difference between the two horns or the two cavities will be less than 4 centimeter. But what does it look like? Actually, bicornuate uterus is something like this. Okay, bicornuate uterus is something like this. Okay, and septate uterus is something like this. There is a septum. This is also making two cavities, septate uterus, and this is also making two cavities, bicornuate uterus. So the two cavities are seen in HSG. The better way is through MRI or laparohysteroscopy. But this is what you should know, how the HSG pictures look like. Now, this is the next and a very interesting question. A woman visits ANC clinic at 5 weeks period of gestation. She has a child with congenital adrenal hyperplasia, and is concerned about her current pregnancy. So the female has already had a child who is suffering from congenital adrenal hyperplasia. What should be done? First, nothing can be done now. She should have consulted before getting pregnant. Second, start her on dexamethasone therapy immediately. Third, start her on dexamethasone therapy after confirming sex of the fetus at 12 weeks. And fourth, nothing needs to be done right now. You evaluate the baby after birth. Now, see, to understand what is congenital adrenal hyperplasia, in this, the cholesterol basically forms aldosterone, cortisol and testosterone, and all these pathways are interrelated, right? So, there are various enzymes responsible. One is 17 alpha hydroxylase, then we have 21 alpha hydroxylase, 11 beta hydroxylase, and all these enzymes, if they are deficient, what do? See, if 21 hydroxylase is deficient or 11 beta hydroxylase is deficient, then this pathway is blocked. Okay, so this is blocked. Okay, this is blocked. Aldosterone does not form, cortisol does not form. Instead, all this. So basically, the substrate above the block increase. And where do they go? They shunt. They all shunt to form this testosterone. What is the problem here? If the baby is a male fetus, then nothing will really happen as per the genitalia and the male development is concerned. But if the female is, if the baby is a female, if the fetus is a female, we have already discussed that the testosterone is basically responsible for development of external genitalia into male. Okay, so if a female fetus in utero is exposed to excessive testosterone, then she will develop ambiguous genitalia. Okay, that is the problem here. So in congenital adrenal hyperplasia, this all shunts to here. Okay, so what do we need to do? We know that the gonads to start with are bipotential in nature, which is why that flow chart was so important, because it is used in so many questions. So the gonads are bipotential. If this fetus is exposed to androgen before, at 8 weeks it starts producing all the hormones. At 8 weeks it starts developing. We cannot wait till 12 weeks or 14 weeks after confirming sex of the fetus. We have to start her on something so that she is not exposed to excessive testosterone. So she should be started on dexamethasone immediately as soon as the pregnancy is identified. Okay, so the answer here is to start her on dexamethasone therapy immediately. What will happen by that? We are providing this. Okay, so the substrate will not accumulate. It will not be shunted to testosterone. So how do we manage congenital adrenal hyperplasia? First of all, it is a syndrome. It is a disorder of sexual development which has the best prognosis because it can be treated in utero. It is the most common cause of ambiguous genitalia, and unfortunately it is the most common endocrine cause of neonatal death. So these are all the MCQs that are asked. So how do we treat here? Mothers who are at risk of congenital adrenal hyperplasia, who have had a baby with congenital adrenal hyperplasia, when the UPT is positive, you start her on dexamethasone immediately, definitely before 9 weeks, before the genitalia starts developing, and then you identify the sex of the fetus. For that you do chorionic villus sampling, which can be done only after 10 weeks, right? Because before that, if you do it, it causes limb abnormalities, right? So after 10 weeks, at 11 weeks, when you do CVS, then you see the sex of the fetus. If the fetus is female, you continue DEXA because you don't want excessive androgens. If the fetus is a male, then you may stop DEXA. Rest of the treatment is postnatal. But this is what you should know. This is the concept behind it, right? So the answer is you start DEXA as soon as the pregnancy is diagnosed.